You're watching the match. A striker buries a shot in the top corner. Before his teammates even reach him, his hand goes to his chest, then up toward the sky, eyes closed for half a second. It looks automatic, like a reflex built into the celebration itself. But it isn't a reflex at all. You've probably watched this 100 times without asking where it comes from. Why the sky? Why that exact motion? Over and over, across different leagues, different countries, different religions even. The real answer sits somewhere between an ancient verse and a modern warning. And once you see it, you won't watch the gesture the same way again. Start with the verse most players never quote out loud. 1 Corinthians says that whatever you do, you should do it for the glory of God, not for yourself, not for the crowd, for someone else entirely. Psalm 115 puts it even more bluntly. Not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name be the glory. The point isn't subtle. The moment belongs to someone other than the person standing in it. That idea didn't stay confined to a church pew. It walked onto the field with players who grew up hearing it, especially across parts of Latin America and Africa, where faith and football are woven together from childhood. Kaka, after lifting the Champions League trophy in 2007, pulled off his jersey to reveal a shirt reading, "I belong to Jesus," underneath. Millions watched. Nobody had to ask what he meant. It wasn't only soccer either. In American football, quarterback Tim Tebow knelt on one knee in prayer after big plays so often that the gesture earned its own name. People started calling it Tebowing, and for a while it spread far beyond the sport itself, showing up in office photos and school hallways as a kind of shorthand for gratitude. The specific posture changes from athlete to athlete. Some point up, some kneel, some cross themselves the moment they cross the goal line. But underneath all of it sits the same instinct borrowed from scripture written thousands of years before any stadium existed. Researchers who study faith in sports have noticed how consistent this pattern is. Cheryl Hoffman, who spent decades studying the relationship between Christianity and competitive sports, argued that modern athletics created an unusual stage, one where private belief gets performed in public, whether the athlete intends it or not. Journalist Tom Crattenmaker, who has spent years reporting on religion in professional sports, described how these small gestures became so common, they eventually stopped registering as unusual at all. There's a second verse worth knowing too. Colossians tells believers to work at everything with their whole heart, as if working for God rather than for people. That verse rarely gets a camera pointed at it. It's not about the 90-second of celebration. It's about the thousands of hours of training nobody filmed at all, the early mornings, the drills repeated until they became instinct. The gesture on the field is really just the visible tip of something that started years earlier, in a gym with no audience. Here's where it gets more complicated though, because the same book that tells you to do everything for God's glory also contains a warning that should make you pause. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus tells his followers to be careful, not to practice their righteousness in front of others just to be seen by them. He goes further. He says people who pray loudly on street corners to be noticed have already received their reward in full. Just the attention, nothing more. So which is it? Is pointing to the sky an act of worship or a performance dressed up as one? New Testament scholar N.T. Wright has written extensively about this exact tension in Paul's letters. His reading is that the glory being described isn't really about the visible gesture at all. It's about where your identity actually rests when the cameras aren't rolling. A hand raised to the sky can mean everything or almost nothing, depending entirely on what's happening in the 15 seconds before it, when nobody is filming. Wright's point isn't that public gestures are automatically fake. It's that the gesture itself can never tell you which one you're looking at. Two players can make the exact same motion for entirely different reasons, and from the stands, they look identical. Media scholar Michael Serrazio, who studies how sports get packaged for global audiences, points out something that changes the whole equation. These gestures used to happen in front of a few thousand fans. Now they happen in front of hundreds of millions, instantly, replayed from a dozen angles. What used to be a private moment between a player and God became, almost by accident, one of the most public acts in modern entertainment. That's the twist most people miss. The gesture itself didn't change. The size of the audience did. And that shift is exactly what Jesus was warning about 2,000 years before television existed. Not the act of giving thanks itself, but what happens to sincerity once an audience gets involved. So maybe the real question was never about the athletes at all. Think about your own version of that moment, the promotion you got, the goal you scored in a smaller, quieter way. Somewhere in your life, there's a version of that hand rising to the sky. Maybe it happened in a group chat. Maybe it happened in a caption under a photo. The question is the same one Jesus asked his followers to sit with. Are you giving credit to God because you mean it, or because someone is watching you do it? There's no way to answer that from the outside. Not for the athlete on the field, and not for you either. A stadium full of cameras can capture the exact angle of a hand lifted to the sky. It cannot capture what that person actually believes in, the half second before the arm moves. Only they know that. Only they and whoever they were really speaking to. The same is true of you, standing in your own kitchen or office. In whatever version of that moment you get, nobody else can grade the sincerity of it. That was never the audience's job to begin with. You're watching the match again. A striker scores. His hand goes up, and for a second, you realize the camera can capture the gesture, but it can never capture the truth behind it. That part was never meant to be seen at all. It was only ever meant to be known.